All right. So, hi, Miss Malcolm Hughes here. And today I want to start something new, something different. I really just want to come for shorter pieces that are not books. I want to come do it in a live setting, right? I want to just talk about them, keep it short, keep it brief, but still hit the critical points. And today, the book that I want to talk about is actually it's a poem, a play, so it's not even a full book because that's the point of this. It's a play by Sonia Sanchez, and it's called But How Do This Free Us? But How Do It Free Us? So I don't have a physical copy because it's a really old play. It initially came out in 1974, but it was mind blowing. So I thought it was worth coming here and sharing. But how do it free us? First of all, that question just itself is an amazing question. Because in the end, no matter what we do, no matter what we're doing, it really grapples with, but how does this liberate us? How does this free us? And by us, she means Black people. So there are three storylines essentially happening within this one play. We first meet a young couple, and there are three individuals. There's a guy and two women living in the same place. We're not sure if they're friends, we're not sure if they're family initially. It eventually turns out that they are all married. By the names, we can gather that they're Muslim, and two of them are actors. One of them is seemingly just a homebody. And it's a little insane. So we have the two women who are together in the same space once the guy leaves because he's like, I need to leave. The woman who's in the play with him is like, I'll come with you. But he's like, no, I have things to do. You just come after. However, it becomes so tricky because once he leaves, it's clear that the women are not in a good space. It's clear they're not friends, that they don't really like each other. And the one guy, before he left, was kind of pitting them against each other or poking fun at the one woman. And once they leave, the first wife is essentially trying to start fight with the second wife. And she's like, I don't want to do this to you. I don't want to fight with you. And the first wife is like, you think you're really special, but once you get pregnant, you'll see he'll treat you just like he treats me. And they end up having a spat essentially. And I think what's so beautiful about it is the fact that through these characters, we get to see so many different dynamics. And it's all so relevant still to present and modern day. And that's really what I love about it. Just the ability to analyze and figure out how does this still matter today. And it really made me think because recently over on Instagram, I saw someone's post, and the post was essentially two women who are Muslim sisters who are married to the same guy. And the post said, he married her behind my back and I hated it, but now we're best friends or something along those lines. And it's so problematic in a sense because that's haram first. That's not the way that's supposed to go. That's betrayal, that's adultery. And you think about it in this current context, you have these women, it wasn't their approval, it wasn't a conversation that was had. So even though you have decided that we're going to do this, right? We're going to try a different route. We're going to liberate ourselves through religion, through Islam. But it always comes back to the question, but how does this free us? How do it free us? And the reality is that it does not. It just does not. Because what's happening is you still have these men in these positions of power, and you have these women who are taking whatever is given to them, who are taking scraps. And it's extremely problematic. And that's a theme that we see throughout. And I think what really drew me to this play beyond the title, but how do it free us, is the fact that even though it was written over 30 years ago, it's still relevant today. And there's still so much to be applied today. And I think we still have not answered the question of how does this free us? How do it free us? How does any of the decisions that we make as far as starting families or building communities, how are we using these things for our collective liberation? So I think that's the question that she's asking. That's the question that we still haven't answered. And I think it may be the most important question that we ever ask and ever answer. All right, so that's our first couple. That's really where we end. We see them having a debate, having this spat. We don't really come back to them again. We just see things continue to progress. Essentially, we see three different couples choose three different paths, or three groups of individuals choose three different pathways, and we see the reality of it, but we don't see the future of it. We don't see the answers. So it always comes back to the question, how do it free us? So our second couple, well, it's not even a couple. We see a group of guys, right? And this dynamic's a little different. It's a group of Black guys who also have a white friend. They've all been recently released from prison, and they go to this courthouse. And the white guy seems to have a lot of mommy issues. He likes to be beat, and then he sometimes turns around and beats the woman who's beating him. So she is essentially pleading, like, she doesn't want to do this with him again. She's like, he's crazy. He's off his rocker. He does things that are beyond what's acceptable. And he's like, I'm not going to do it, baby. This time I'm not going to do it. Like, that's not what I'm here for. I just want to feel the pain. And the situation turns the same again. And it starts off with her beating him. He taps into some like latent memory of childhood, and he then says, like, starts beating, like, mommy, why do you want to beat me? I haven't done anything wrong. And then he turns on her and starts beating her, and no one stops it for a very long time. It's scary how long this is allowed to happen. Again, not necessarily different from modern day, right? Like, sometimes people don't get involved in situations that they're like, that's not my business. But if it's community, and if we are striving for liberation and freedom, we have to hold each other and ourselves accountable. So again, how do it free us, right? How does complacency free us? How does a lack of involvement, arguably comparable to apathy, free us? So this story progresses, and there is also a Black sex worker who's there, and eventually she becomes involved. The guy really has ill feelings toward her. It is not necessarily, this is a different guy. This is one of the Black guys has ill feelings toward her, and it's not necessarily directed at her, but it's the fact that he wants power and authority over her. So they have a weird dynamic. He's essentially projecting a lot of things onto her, who she is and who he expects her to be. And then eventually they do drugs. It becomes a different dynamic because she's telling him, which may be her own thoughts, but she's having it rooted in some of the other guys who come there younger. They're teaching her things that, like, you are a queen, you can be free, you are someone worthy of liberation, right? Like, you don't have to live this life. And the guy who's currently there is telling her, you chose this life. You're only doing this because you want to do this, right? So that is what is happening. But eventually there becomes a competition, right? So the guy's like, all these young guys are telling you you're a queen, get the fur out the closet. And she's essentially told to, like, model a queen, be a queen, walk. And as she pretends or portrays this queen-like character, eventually she begins to move it. She begins to maneuver differently. She begins to walk differently. She begins to speak differently. She begins to carry herself in a manner of regal, like regale, of just regalness. And during this, eventually the white guy is like, who do you think you are? If anyone is going to be a queen here, it's going to be me. So then this puts another layer on top of it. So they have a competition, and eventually he beats her down in order for him to be on top. And I think this is, again, so layered. I think one thing that I love about Sonia Sanchez, poetry, any type of writing that she does, is that it's layered, it's complicated, it's complex, but it is rooted in a place of having a deep desire for the wellness of Black people, of Black culture. And that, I feel as if, is something that you cannot argue against. There's like a deep love there and a deep desire for healing And same thing here. So in this complex dynamic, you have someone who's trying to have supreme control and power, but is rooted in mommy issues, is rooted in their own trauma, right? And then you have these Black men here as well who they are so positioned in I will rule this land. But the way in which they're ruling the land is they're currently drug dealers, right? It's coming from that era where they're ruling like the crack community, like crack coming into their communities. They're getting a lot of money that way, and they feel as if that's giving them sovereignty, that's giving them superiority. When in reality, you're doing more harm than good, right? And you also are essentially you're still working for the white man, someone you say you're having liberation from, and essentially you brought in the enemy as your friend, someone that you can't trust, someone who is abusing your women, someone who is doing all of these things, but you yourself feel as if all of this gives you power. It's a false sense of power and it's not true. So again, it comes back to the question of, but how do it free us? So again and again, same question. And we're not getting the answer. So right now we see two different scenarios, right? You have this religion and you have these practices, but how does this free us, right? How do it free us? You are in and of the world, right? You have this false power that's doing more harm to the community. You yourself are positioning yourself to do harm instead of heal, but you feel as if you have power, so everything is okay. Okay, how do it free us? We're not seeing it, right? And then we have this third scenario. And the third scenario, kind of similar, but it's a little different. Because it is a play, it's sometimes difficult to see how these may interconnect. I do believe that they're all separate. None of the characters seem to be the same people, but there does appear to be a thread. So different scenarios, but similar, similar situations and similar dynamics. So in our third storyline, we have a guy who is a revolutionary leader, right? Um, he has a long beard. So there's some aspects to this, like one girl's parents say he has the same beard as Castro, right? So that's supposed to be indicative of the type of leader, right? But someone who arguably is presented as one type of leader, but has a completely different life, duplicitous, if you will. So that's what we have here. We have this guy who's supposed to be a revolutionary. His Black, and this matters, right? His Black girlfriend, fiance, if you will, has just moved across the country to be with him, but he secretly has a white girlfriend who he is in love with, if you will. I would argue that he's not actually in love with either of them. And I think that's something that you could argue is a valid point to be made. So he has this woman, and the woman is essentially here because he needs a cover, right? He's moving up in the ranks, and it's like, okay, but you need a Black woman by your side, right? Like you cannot continue to progress, you cannot continue to advance if you do not have a Black woman by your side. And the white woman, she's in secret, and she is essentially funding him, but this is all allowing her to have control over him. And she is telling him like, oh, it's okay. Yeah, you need this Black woman. I'm glad she came. The Black woman in herself is also someone within the revolutionary movement. She is more popular than him, right? She's someone who's really proactive. She's really kind of intense and she stands on her principles. But this guy is presented as one way, secretly has another life. And it's so complicated, if you will, but arguably quite simple, the psychology of it, because you have this guy who, though he wants to present as if, yes, I'm the ideal Black man. Yes, we're creating the Black family. Yes, I'm for the liberation of Black people. But that's not actually how he feels, right? And the way in which he treats the Black woman opposed to how he treats the white woman is clear of that, right? So he leaves the black woman often alone to go be with the white woman. The black woman may beg him to be there. He doesn't. He stays with the white woman if she begs him to be there, and she complains, and she has them do a really kind of ritualistic wedding ceremony that's problematic. She also comes out in like a natural wig and African garb. And she's like, I can be everything you need. I could be everything you desire. I can be natural when you want natural. And then she takes it off and she's like, and I can be me when you want me. So she's essentially arguing that I can give you everything you need. I can give you more than what she can give you. And I don't want to say the guy falls for it because it's deeply layered, right? Because he's finding like liberation and salvation in her. But he's also someone who wants power and control. And if you're in America, that's who has that. It's also a bit of, I would even argue, Stockholm syndrome, right? Because you've idolized this culture that has been presented to you as the ideal, right? It's something that you cannot have for so long. So you want that. But then you also want to be accepted by your people. So then you want to have a black woman as well, but you don't treat her well, right? If anything, once he has promised the black woman that I'm going to come home to you and he doesn't, right? She's like, who is she? Tell me who she is. Let me know. I can feel it in my bones. And he's like, that's what's wrong with you bougie women now, right? Like once you decide that you want to be black, you expect life to be this, this, and this. But in actuality, you were born black. You're going to get what all black women get. He slaps her multiple times. And he's like, you're a black bee. You're this, you're that. Do what I tell you. You're not leaving, blah, 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 blah. And it just reminded me so much of a conversation between Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin and the pathology and the deeply rooted division and problems that sometimes exist within a community, because Nikki Giovanni in the interview was telling James Baldwin, you go out in the world and you pretend and you put on this facade, you put on a happy face, you treat them well, you smile, you laugh, you grin, and you come home and you give me the brunt of it, right? You give me the pain of it. This is what I get. And James Baldwin is like, yeah, because I don't want to have to pretend here, right? I don't want to have to pretend. I don't want to have to put on the facade. She's like, but you go out and you give everyone the best of you, right? Come home and pretend with me. Be kind to me. And I could tell James Baldwin had never really thought of it that way. And this play touches on so many issues that I think are still relevant and still prevalent today. So the play itself, it even ends by saying there's no ending and no beginning, right? So we are left with questions. We don't know what the resolution is, right? The guy's planning to leave, and well, he leaves and he promises her that, like, I might be able to send for you soon. And she's left, and then she kneels and she prays, and then she laughs because she's like, even the gods I've been taught to believe in, right? They are not responding to my Black problems. They've never done anything for Black people. And it's so multi-layered. But also the issues are still so critical, so prevalent today, right? But even within that, right? So outside of the key just dynamics of the three different situations, I think there are valid points that are being made outside of that as well. So we do have heavy topics here, right? But I think what is so important, again, like I said, it could have been written today. It's still prevalent today. One thing, the language used is sometimes very shocking, and it's appropriate to the time. Sometimes it's laughable because you're out of the context. Like they say man a lot, right? Like, where you been, man? Or I love you, man. And it's from a different time, but it's like almost laughable today, but not actually. You have to put yourself within that time. It's also it made me think of things on different levels, because on one hand, you also have the white woman who speaks to the Black man in this manner. And so everyone's speaking this way, right? So it's almost like a caricature as well, right? But also, like, for me, it just feels also like distance, right? Like it's supposed to be love. And Not to say that that can't be love, but it like lacked a certain intimacy. But I know that it's a different time, so it was still there. But I did feel it missed like a little bit of kindness sometimes, especially in the third storyline. Also, so women fighting over men. Again, going back to that theme. But how do it free us? How does this help us, right? Is this really where the energy should be going? Is this really what you want? And if that is really what you want, by all means, I'm for women's liberation. If that's what you actually want, do that, live that. But if this isn't what you're desiring, you're accepting it, then you're allowing yourself to be put in a position where you're settling and you're accepting less than what you deserve, right? So how does that free us? How do it free us? It doesn't. It doesn't. Also, yeah, she deals with a lot of topics here. Childhood trauma, right? Toxicity on multiple levels. Also, one thing that I really, really liked was the conversation in the third act that the Black woman before she moves has with her mother. And the mother makes the argument because the woman is telling her mother, like, I'm a new type of Black woman. I don't need a man. I work. We have our own money. We bring the money, and the man goes out and fights for the people. And the mother is looking at her like, girl, what? Literally, she's sitting there like, no, that's a problem, right? That is a problem because if you allow the man to think that he doesn't have to provide for you or he isn't accountable to you in any way, then everything is out of order. Everything is out of sync. And these are arguments that are still occurring today. But I think it's important for people to figure out what works for them, what makes sense for them, right? There's an argument in religion usually of equally yoked, and what does it mean to be equally yoked? But is what you're doing getting you closer to freedom? Is it freeing you, right? How do it free us? And I think I'm obsessed with that question because I don't think we think about that today. We don't think about all the time, like, how is this working towards collective liberation? How is this working toward collective freedom? I just don't think we think about that all the time. And I think maybe we should think about that more. So I really just wanted to come on quickly and just share this play. Not a lot of answers, right? But just to say that, like, there is this play that exists that the title itself asks a profound question, and it causes us to really think about how the past impacts the present. There's a little phrase that I like. It's the momentum of memory, and I think we lack that. So I think oftentimes we look at situations. Anyone who knows me knows that one of my biggest issues is that I feel like a lot of Americans or just American culture is to act ahistorically. There's no memory. We act like everything is a new issue, but there's so much history that already exists that has answers and has solutions, or at least has a map of what was done, and we can figure out what worked and what didn't, and we can improve from there, right? So even some of the text you see behind me, right? History. And I think it's so critical for us to tap into that history and to have conversations about it, have dialogue, have community. And I think this play does that. It really presses on issues that were relevant then, issues that are still relevant today. They didn't free us then. It's not freeing us today. So what are we going to do differently and what are we going to do better? So that's just what I wanted to share. Like I said, for these new live sessions, they'll come sporadically. They'll come when I'm inspired. I read a lot of different texts. My book reviews will still be coming in video form. But if I'm reading something that's less than a full book, whether it be a graphic novel or a comic book or a play or an essay, right? Or a news article, whatever it may be, I'm just going to hop on live. I'll try to at least say like a day before or something when I'm thinking about it, like, hey, I'm thinking of doing this thing. But this is like fun for me. So I just wanted to come and talk about it and share it with y'all. I hope that folks will check this out. I hope that people will enjoy it and like it. And I hope that folks will Read the play. How do it free us? It's a little difficult to find online. If you're really interested in it, let me know. I think it's worth checking out. So, as always, that is it for me. I'm Ms. Malcolm Hughes, one who believes that books are sometimes better than people. And until next time, please continue to give time and to have the best day of your life on purpose. Hola,